I mean, sometimes they do have to cry it out, but I wouldn't just, I try to take care of his basic needs if he needs some help. So.
Yeah. All right, so we are streaming again.
Oh.
Back.
Talking about that child abuse.
Yeah. Talking about me abusing my child because he's crying and doesn't want to go to bed.
Rough life being 19 months old and not.
Yes, exactly. Being taken care of by your mother.
All right. You
and
said
just not wanting to go to sleepy time.
You were lagging up. You look fine now if you want to stay, but if you want to leave.
Oh, I'm lagging on my end. It was like
Oh.
when you guys were talking about the entire like Zelda era thing, it was like I did not hear any of it.
Bah! That's no good.
Yeah.
Alright.
Okay.
So.
Well. If it gets to be too much, then you may need to jump out, but.
Yeah.
Hopefully it works out.
Alright.
Yeah.
We can start. You guys ready?
Yes.
Sorry to delay it by 18 minutes.
It's okay. I'm having fun screwing with your audience.
Alright.
That's what counts. Priorities.
Yeah.
I should take my phone off my desk because I had it on my desk right next to where my microphone is.
I have an idea.
And if it vibrates, it just the sound. Oh, that would be terrible for your ears.
Alright, well, while we're waiting on her.
The godfather of the Nintendo 64 DD.
Oh.
Everything that I do with the DD is with his help. He is the mastermind behind everything. I'm merely peasant's hands that do the tinkering for him. He is the genius.
I've seen you cite him in many of your videos.
Yes. Alright,
Yes.
so the video showed everything was fine, so I guess we can start as soon as everyone's ready.
Goody.
Yes.
Sweet. This is my ready face.
Yeah, I was just looking at the chat. It looks like it's still lagging on my end, but it still looks like it's fine. So, I don't know. Anyways,
Oh yeah, it is lagging on your end.
No.
That's
Yeah,
weird.
people keep saying that it's dying. Have you tried taking the bitrate of the stream, bringing it down?
Yeah, I can try that really quick. Alright, so the bitrate has been taken down.
Okay.
Okay, we're having people say the stream's good for me now. Everyone's saying it's fine now. It was the bitrate.
Alright.
Okay.
So you gotta listen to me. Gotta listen to me, guys. Right?
Yeah.
Needs their math.
Alright, I found out what the problem was. It was that, but it was also... There's two Wi-Fi connections, and I was at the wrong one, so...
Ah, okay. Well, I don't know if Luigi Blood heard my introduction to him, but so everyone in the chat knows, because I don't know if he was lagging at the time, that we have a celebrity in the chat, Luigi Blood, the one, the only, one of the great godfathers of the Nintendo 64 disk drive. He is the man when it comes to preservation, not just of the DD, but also like Satellaview and just anything rare, like in that sort of genre. He is a genius. He's a great guy as well. Worked with him for years and years and years now, I think.
Yeah.
Very good amount of time anyways.
Alright, yeah, the stream looks good. No one's saying there's any audio issues, so we can finally get started. Okay, everybody ready? Yes?
Yep.
Okay. This is the part that I always hate. It takes like a few minutes to get into the podcast mood, but alright. What's up, everybody? I am Jesse, or Game Over Jesse, as you all may know me. And here with us, as always, is Daniel and Kayla.
Everybody.
Hello.
And our special guest, who is returning to the channel, but the first time officially being on the podcast, Tony, from Hard4Games. Tony, who are you, and why should people care?
Oh, that's a loaded
Yeah,
question. I
totally.
don't know. Jeez. Well, thank you for having me on the podcast. And basically, yeah. So I run a gaming review show on YouTube. We focus on a lot of development and beta content, a lot of Nintendo stuff, a lot of kind of branching out recently, Xbox, Sony, all sorts of stuff. But you know, Jesse invited me on. I've been on the channel before to talk about Zelda content, and for some reason he wanted me on again. So here I am.
Yeah. So I think for at least a year or two was when you first came on, a year or two ago. I'm not really sure, but you've been on,
I think so.
You've been on a few times, so it's great to have you on an actual podcast.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad to be here.
We've already had like longer interviews with you. We're going to do sort of a brief interview to let the people that are watching that may have not watched the old episodes know exactly who you are, what you do, some of your favorite videos and stuff like that. But first, we have to give the Patreon shout-outs, which I forget to do sometimes. So
Yeah, Jesse.
we always end the podcast with our Zelda mailbag, where you can submit your Zelda questions to have them answered. But sometimes we get too many questions and we can't answer all of them. So if you would like your question to guaranteed to be answered on the show, as well as a bunch of other cool stuff, then you can head over to patreon.com/GameOverJesse, just like Jacob, Michael, Elmer, Gus, Justin, Ashley, that one pancake, Key of Time 15, Monica, Casey. Link uses the Triforce, Megan, Lunarium, Robbie Morgan, Shadow to Us, Rusty, and Lovable Christy. So, before we get to the mailbag, after our interview, we have our topic of discussion, which this time, since we have Tony and his expertise here, we're going to be discussing what if Zelda Ura released and the N64 disk drive was a success, which I believe one time you said you had a similar topic on your channel that you had a discussion with your co-host.
Yes. Yeah, you know, there's a lot of hypotheticals with that, but I think there's some situationally dependent things that would have had to have happened for it to be successful, but you know, we can get into that when the time comes.
Yeah. All right, and the news that we will be discussing is Nintendo talks about a next-gen successor to the 3DS, which we all probably are in belief is dying at this point, especially with the Switch being such a success. Microsoft hints at multiple next-gen consoles, not just a new Xbox, but maybe a different variant as well. So, kind of like how they have the Xbox One S and the Xbox One X right now. And our third piece of news, if we have time, is Bethesda discusses Fallout 4 not coming to Nintendo Switch, but other games are. So, beginning with our interview, what inspired you to start making videos, Tony?
Well, you know, I went to college, I actually went to U of M, I have a film degree, and when you're kind of working in your passion, sometimes you don't always get to be as creative as you want to be, right? Let's say you do graphic design. Well, you're not necessarily always doing graphic design for a product that you love, for example. So I wanted a creative outlet, and I met with my friends, and we were playing a lot of NBA Jam at the time. Actually did not start with Zelda, started with NBA Jam. I'm sorry, everybody. It's amazing. And we're like, you know, why don't we just do a review? And we did, and we didn't know what we were doing really. I mean, filmmaking wise we did, but like for YouTube we didn't. And it just kind of spawned from there. Uh-oh, did we lose him?
I
Who did we lose?
think he just might have turned it off while he went to do something, is what I'm assuming.
Oh, okay.
So you continue.
Oh, okay, yeah. So it just kind of spawned from there, and you know, the whole N64 DD thing almost happened by accident. You know, I remembered a trifold brochure that I found in Target when I was a kid. Like the memory just popped up into my brain, and it was talking about the N64 DD. And I was like, you know, did I make that memory up? Like, I don't remember that thing ever coming out. So I started researching it, and it just snowballed into it being incorporated into the show. So a lot of what we've done over the years is talked about the N64 disk drive, Zelda, Zelda. For those of you that don't know, that's sort of the lost expansion for Ocarina of Time. And it kind of snowballed into a bunch of people contacting me saying, hey, I have a beta of this. I have a review copy of this. Can you take a look at it? So, you know, with Luigi Blood's help, with other individuals online that have helped me out, you know, we've been able to confirm, you know, fakes of Zelda titles, like actual, you know, beta versions of games that we've been sort of gifted or loaned for a short period of time. And that's kind of more so what we're known for. We also do reviews of just whatever, you know, tickles our fancy, but I think most people know us for the DD and the Zelda and the beta stuff.
Yeah, that's how I came to find your channel. And I think at that point you already had several Zelda videos up, so I just kind of binged watched through them. And then once I started to make my own YouTube channel, it was the perfect opportunity to reach out to everyone that I was already a fan of to try to bring them on mine. And you were one of the nice people who responded. So, yeah.
I try.
Yeah. Well, you also had, not just with us or me on this channel, but you've had a lot of other collaborations with other channels as well. What would you say your biggest collaboration would be?
Well, you already know the answer to that question, but
well, I'm asking again, for everyone.
Sure, yeah, no, I know. I'm just poking you.
And then after this, so probably Daniel and Kayla, you guys can ask a question after this one, and then we can go to the news.
The probably the biggest one was, again, N64 DD related. Metal Jesus Rocks. First name is Jason, but you may be familiar with this channel. Metal Jesus Rocks found an American prototype N64 DD, which, if you don't know, it was only released in Japan. So having an American version, of course, you know they must have existed, but never being released, no one's ever seen one, right? So the BIOS and everything was all in English. And so we found that, and then he also found a blue development disc, but it wasn't readable on the retail prototype. So I flew out there and helped him out, and we did 2 collaborative videos, one of which was just for fun, and one of which was discussing what was on that disc and talking about how we preserved the IPL, which is the firmware on his unit, and preserved the software that was on his disc, which was basically just sort of like debugging and actually not debugging, it was more like hardware testing software. So that was probably the biggest one, and that's how a lot of people kind of filtered over to our channel. But we've done a bunch of other ones too, and you know, always happy to hang out with some cool people like yourselves. Right.
Well, thank you.
So.
All right, Kayla, do you have a question? Anything that you would like to know about his channel that you think other people might also like to know?
I feel like out of, I don't know if any of the viewers have ever... Oh my goodness, okay, you have quite a few subscribers. Sorry, I just did a quick YouTube review.
Surprise!
Yeah. Wow. But yeah, I was gonna actually ask, like, how does, kind of trying to make videos and kind of work out how life works, because I know we had to kind of do the podcast and wait till your kid was sleeping, so I think after having a child, like, things get a little bit complicated for trying to produce. So how do you kind of try and sort that one out?
Yeah, well, you know, I think there's a famous line from Dante's Inferno. It's like, abandon all hope, ye who enter here. No, it's super challenging. Like, I've always been super busy. I've always been a workaholic, but when my kid came along, it became infinitely more challenging. But luckily, I have a really great supportive team, and probably most importantly for time management wise, we hired on an editor this past year. So she is incredible. Actually, she does a Twitch stream. Rucrow is the name. You should all check it out. She's awesome, and she's a fantastic editor. She normally does the first cut of a video, and then I finish it up and kick it out. So that has been why I've been able to spend time with my family.
Aw.
To be honest with you, because
that's awesome. That's
of
awesome.
help. You know, it's very hard to juggle otherwise. Not to be like a sob story, but it just is what it is. You know, I mean, if you have a child, you know, it's just madness. You know, it's that's why we drink.
That's kind of how I brought Daniel on in the first place.
Well, it's funny that Kayla asked this question because, you know, you already co-host this podcast with 2 other people who have kids, Kayla.
Well,
She doesn't care about your kids. She cares about mine.
your children.
It's only the cool parents.
All right.
She only cares about the cool parents.
Yeah.
Oh.
Confirmed. Kayla doesn't actually care about Jesse or Daniel.
Yeah.
I already knew that. So.
Priorities are important. You know, it is what it is.
All right, Daniel, you got a question?
Okay, well, couple, I guess. So, even before working with Jesse, when I was a nobody on the internet, I guess, you know, I was already a fan of yours. We're all nobodies, really.
Yeah.
You know, I was a big fan of your videos, everything. Like Jesse and many other of my favorite channels, I discovered yours through Zelda Informer when you're doing beta questing for Ocarina of Time. And so when you were doing those like beta quests and stuff, obviously there's a lot of technical hiccups and weirdness. Like, what would you say? Because like, part of the humor of those videos is the frustration of dealing with these beta quests. What would you say is one of those biggest frustrations that you've come across in all of the beta quests that you've done?
Yeah, because when you're dealing with the beta, you're dealing with like half-broken code that's not supposed to be there.
Or invisible walls and unfinished things.
In the early days, like I was doing this, I don't think I was doing it before Project 64, but probably before I knew about Project 64 and was super familiar with the debug ROM. So the codes that were out there were very sort of like, all right, here's a base code, and then you can kind of change these numerals, and it would have various effects, and that would all be it, right? And so you could just have an infinite number of combinations. So the first couple beta quests, you know, you would basically load your Ocarina of Time and you'd utilize a Game Shark. But for those of you that have not used an N64 Game Shark, it's terrible. Basically, what you have to do is you put the Game Shark in, put Mario 64 in, hope it boots, then go and basically choose a key code, Zelda, shut it off, pop it out, pop it back on, hope that it boots. Most of the time it doesn't. Now keep in mind, if someone before you chose a key code that wasn't Mario 64, or some random key code, and you put Mario on it, it would expect the game that they asked for originally. So it just wouldn't work, right? So it's very finicky, and then you have to go like line by line putting in this code, and like each line takes about a minute. And you have lines of codes that are like 20, 30 lines. And then sometimes that doesn't work. Or sometimes if you're just experimenting with a new code that maybe you made up yourself, maybe it does nothing, and you wasted all that time, and you have to reboot the Game Shark.
This was all without emulation? This was on actual N64?
All the early stuff, totally without emulation. Yeah. Most of the stuff was without emulation. Only recently we've used emulation just because it's like, I mean, it's like, good God, it takes so long, you know. But even... yeah, Luigi Blood commented, Game Shark is messy. I own one, it's a mess. But, you know, we recently did a video where we were looking at playing as Cafe, who's that character in Majora's Mask, purple hair, that you have to help out. He has the longest quest in Majora's Mask. And, you know, I was just going to put it up on emulator. My co-host John was like, you know, use real hardware. Like, people like that when it's real hardware. And I'm like, but people liked it, that it was real hardware, but it just a mess. And that's probably the biggest frustration, was that the restarts. I mean, you spend like a full afternoon or a day, you know, you overheat your N64, you know, doing this. And it was really kind of something that I was more capable of doing before I was living with my wife or had a kid or, you know, had a full-time job. So emulation is much easier, but I try to do real hardware whenever possible. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure.
No, it does. It's
okay.
You know, those are the bits we don't actually see in the video, and part of the fun of those videos is the charm of you guys being like, this was so frustrating, this thing, and then y'all drink, and just like to deal with it. Yeah. What you drinking right now, by the way? As the other person who has been caught drinking on stream.
I'd rather not say. It's so bad because it's so hot out. Lately, we've been getting a lot of comments on our videos saying, you know, why are you guys drinking? You know, like, this is really triggering me. So what we do is we just keep drinking more.
It's the shtick, though.
Yeah, it's the shtick. Like, they're like, are you an alcoholic? It's like because I drank 2 beers over the course of like 5 hours, you know, once a week, you know. So, but we shot the other day and we were drinking and harder because we have to keep up the facade. So right now I'm just drinking a Michelob Ultra, which is a crappy light beer. So it's not a good beer. I do not recommend it. If you're going to get a Michelob, definitely do the pure gold, but it's terrible.
I just realized we made a joke. I think we made a joke about you when we were at E3.
Because I was drinking.
And we were all drinking wine, and we were like, we'll just be like Hard4Games for the day.
Yeah, just drinking on the street. Well, no, because that was the day I was triple fisting, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I just had like a collection of glasses in front of me.
Yeah, Daniel had 2 beers and a glass of wine. So
yeah,
that's good stuff.
But it's funny is that you say that of people like questioning if you're an alcoholic, because what most people watching don't see is like what may be a 3 or 5 minute video is probably like a couple hours of filming.
Yeah.
Or, you know, and just like, okay, you might have 2 beers over. They just see this 3 minutes and you pounded back a couple of drinks, but it's like, guys, it's not, you know, there's editing involved. You know, you don't the whole stretch.
Yeah, I mean, it's
not like you paused the video, chugged it, and then started going again.
I mean, if anything, I would do that on screen, right? If I was doing that, it's funny, but it's, you know, oftentimes I'll tell people, like, listen, you know, sometimes adults will go to the bar and they'll have a couple drinks to relax and whatever, but, you know, instead of going to the bar, we're just doing this at home. And Hard4Games is my hobby, so this is just what we're doing. And then, so I treat them like they're like 12, and they don't know. And then they're like, well, I'm 40, but it's still really offensive. And it's like, okay, man, like, but then a lot of people jump on and they're like, dude, like, they're clearly adults, you know, what are you talking about? It's not an issue that I care about, it's just an issue that I think is funny.
Yeah,
really
it is.
So.
All right, well, final question, unless either of you have any other questions.
No, I just wanted to ask about the beer because that's Tony's whole. Like I said, that's the whole shtick, you know.
Yeah.
So.
All right.
Just needed to know.
So my final question is: you've had tons and tons of videos about various different things, mostly the beta stuff. But in the future, if there was one dream project that you could do, or one video that you could make, but like acquiring whatever console or game or whatever it is, like acquiring it seems to be an impossibility, what would it be?
You know, I mean, you know, we always talk about the Zelda and the Earthbound 64 to death, you know, so I'm going to actually steer away from those. Just a couple of other holy grails, because those are kind of the obvious ones, you know. Probably one of the biggest holy grails for me, if to find like a beta of something, would be the original make of Secret of Mana, because it was on the SNES CD. It was on the Super Famicom PlayStation, was the original medium for it. And then they had to chop it down severely, like over 60% of the game went by the wayside because they had to bring it down to a 16 megabit cartridge. So I would love to find some content from early development on the SNES CD. Really any game that I have a personal connection to, maybe that I played as a kid, you know, finding an early version of that, or, you know, I don't know. I get excited for anything that's rare and interesting, honestly.
So if you were to find that, would there be a way to actually play it? Like, would it run on an SNES emulator, or would you need like
you probably would need, well, you know, the SNES, I would have to double check, because the SNES CD, I think it has its own BIOS, so you wouldn't. I think you would maybe. I know people have been working on like that software because it is available now. Like the actual like firmware for the SNES CD is like online somewhere. I don't know if it's like a call it. So I'm not sure 100%, but there is that one guy who owns a Play Space Station, not PlayStation, together. So it would be possible to figure it out.
It's funny, one of those, when that surfaced, you know, it went kind of convention hopping. There's
still
a
is.
convention that I think Kayla and I mentioned before on the podcast called Vancouver Retro Gaming Expo, which happens in my hometown. and they had it there, and I didn't get to go. I was working my day job at the time the convention was going, but my brother went, and he was able to play. Like he said, at this point, it runs just as a Super Nintendo because there's no game to play on it.
Yeah.
But he got to play a round of Super Mario Kart on a Nintendo PlayStation. It's just something that seems so wicked to me, even though it's just the same game, you know?
Yeah, exactly. Just the experience. I'm going to actually correct myself real quick because we have a comment in the chat from Luigi Blood. And I told you guys he's the godfather, right? So he says the SNES emulates the SNES CD with the BIOS that I released with one of the owners. So of course Luigi Blood was involved in this somehow, right? He's like on top of it. So
he's the daddy of this.
I think I knew that. Maybe I had just forgotten because I wasn't part of that project. But I would go to Luigi Blood and I'd figure it out if I found any sort of software content. That's what I would do. That would be the plan. To answer your question.
Sweet.
Well,
Puppy?
I guess. Oh yeah, there is a puppy there.
Is that Taco?
Yeah,
What's up, dog?
Taco?
very fat.
What's up, dog? That's a chunky dog right there.
That dog has a scarf made of his own fat.
I know. Look at him.
Yeah.
He's just such a beautiful boy. Look at him.
There you go.
Alright, so I think we can move on to the first piece of news, which is the... if it loads. Alright, here we go. So, this comes from IGN. Nintendo's president says the company is looking into all possibilities when asked about a 3DS successor. There isn't much to be said here. It just says, could Nintendo release a true portable successor to the 3DS at some point? According to Nintendo's new president, Shintaro Furukawa. I hope I pronounced that right.
Furukawa?
Furukawa?
Oh my goodness, I can't pronounce it any better.
Yeah. He says there's potential, while not specifically stating that a 3DS successor is in the works. He did say that Nintendo is looking into all possibilities. Now, several months ago, I want to say it was sometime last year, there was a job listing that Nintendo put up about working on next-gen hardware. And this was already, like, I think it was right after the Switch released or right before the Switch released. So it wasn't referring to the Switch, it was referring to whatever else was in development, whether it was a next-gen home console or a next-gen handheld, and now that seems to line up with handhelds, since the 3DS is dying off, and now he's saying that they are looking into possibilities and stuff. So if you just go by that and put 2 and 2 together, then it looks like the listing was likely for the successor to the 3DS. So this isn't really a question or a news video on are they going to release one. It's more of a discussion on what we would personally like to see. There's a few different possibilities that I was thinking of, which is they could turn the Nintendo Switch into the handheld console and then release an actual dedicated home console that is on par with PlayStation or Xbox. Because my reasoning for that is, if you look at the console power or the graphical power of the Nintendo Switch, it is in line with what a current gen handheld system would be, not a current gen home console system. Because if you look at the PSP, it was, I believe, somewhere between the PS1 and PS2 in terms of power, and then the PlayStation Vita was somewhere between the PlayStation 2 and PlayStation 3. The Vita didn't have a successor, but if it would have been in line with somewhere between the PS3 and the PS4. And that is where the Switch currently is, to where it's not quite as powerful as the PlayStation 4, but it's still more powerful than the PlayStation 3. So I believe that the Switch would just fall in where it currently sits, which is, in terms of power, the handheld. And we even heard that they're going to be selling I think it's just for Japan though, but they're going to be selling the Nintendo Switch by itself without a dock for like $50 or $70 cheaper. So my guess would be they would turn the Switch into the handheld, and then they would have a new dedicated home console that would be their home console on par with the new PlayStation 4, PlayStation 5, or whatever. And then the second option is they just want to keep making dual screen type games, so they release something similar to the 3DS except a lot more powerful, maybe as powerful or almost as powerful as the Switch, but has dual screen instead of the single screen, and it's only portable. So those are my two things that I was thinking, but am interested in hearing from you guys. Tony, since you are our guest, why don't you go first?
Well, you stole my joke when you said that it's not the Switch, because I wrote down here, I've got a scoop on the working title. The new system, the new handheld system, is called the Nintendo Switch. Oh. 'Cause honestly, I think that the Switch is just going to overtake the 3DS. I think that probably you're going to get along the lines of what you had mentioned, maybe like a Switch Mini that's like truly like you can put it in your pocket, you can put it in your purse, and then I think eventually what you're going to get is like a Switch Plus, kind of like like a Switch Pro version. At some point in a couple of years from now, they're going to bump up the RAM, they're going to bump up the processor just a little bit, kind of like what they did with the new 3DS, kind of like what they did with the PlayStation Pro or the Xbox One X, just to kind of keep on the same level, just so developers can still port games to it without too much trouble. They have just enough power to do it, and then go small with a different version of it. But I mean, honestly, the Switch was so successful that I don't know. I mean, because so many people utilize it as a handheld, but it's not. But it is. I don't know if Nintendo's really going to make another like DS style system. I think it might cannibalize their Switch sales at this point.
Yeah, most of the time they wait, like the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. They were released at a time when the sales for the new console started slowing down, so they would put out like a slim version, the Xbox One S, to kind of boost sales again. And what you were saying with like the Switch Plus or Pro, whatever they call it, if it does come out, Nintendo is like, there's a lot of people that said Nintendo wouldn't do that. They're not going to release like a slightly better version or whatever, but it's more likely. Yeah, I think it's more likely that they would, because they're known for doing that. Like if you look at every single handheld console they've released, I think we lost Kayla. She might come back.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, the Game Boy had the Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Advanced had the SP, the DS had like the DSi, the DSi XL, and everything. The 3DS had 3DS XL, the new 3DS. Yeah. So like every single handheld console they've had some sort of upgrade for it, and every single home console except the Wii U had some sort of upgrade as well. So the Famicom had the
Wii U had like the Deluxe, which had
more
storage, which is
I don't know if storage is really like a power,
but it's not really a processing power upgrade. I mean, that's the only thing.
Some systems, some of the they all had add-ons. Probably the only system that was like a console that was more like a pro system would be the N64 had the RAM expansion.
Yeah, that
you
was
just pop it and pop it out, and it boosts up the RAM by an additional 4 megabytes, and you get higher resolution, whatever. Yeah, better frame rates for certain games, depending on the game.
There was a video done by a good friend, Nintendo Prime, Nate, who, actually was back in his Zelda Informer days, when he got the Wii U Deluxe, he tested it against his old Wii U that he had gotten on release, and all they really advertised change-wise was that it had more storage.
Yeah.
Okay.
But he did find that it had better running hardware, and he had greater connectivity distance between the console and the gamepad.
Really? Okay.
Whereas with this first one, he could get about 10 feet away, and then it would lose connection.
Yeah.
And with the Deluxe, he could go to the other side of his house. and keep connected and little things like that. So, but then they didn't advertise that. They didn't
advertise anything about the Wii U.
They didn't.
The Wii U had no advertising whatsoever.
Zero. I didn't even know about it until after its release.
I'd never played a Wii U Deluxe. I just got the original Wii U because a buddy of mine worked at Toys R Us, and basically they forgot to sell one in the back like years after it came out, and they're like, we're selling it for like $100. And this was when the Wii U like Deluxe was like $250 or something like that.
Yeah.
So I'm like, I'll do the original.
Yeah.
I have now 2 Wii U Deluxes in my house right now.
Yeah, one of my favorite games of all time, Wind Waker HD, is only playable on the Wii U. So I love the Wii U just for that. There's other great games as well, but when I think of the Wii U, I automatically think of Wind Waker HD. And
best version of Twilight Princess out of the 3.
And you recently played through Wind Waker HD, Daniel, and I think you did as well, Tony, a few months ago. And I'm pretty sure Kayla has played through it as well. Wind Waker HD?
Nope.
No?
No, but you said
That's
you
why I
wanted
asked
to.
Oh yeah, she's borrowing. Okay, yeah.
Because she wanted to borrow it from me because, as I mentioned, I told you guys this, but I'm a ridiculous person when it comes to like collecting consoles and things like that. So I have like multiple
look
Super
at all the
Nintendos
boxes
and
behind
N64s and oh well, yeah. I mean, that's I guess part of why I love Tony so much. But then I saw online like a private seller selling their Wii U, and it was like the Wii U Pro Controller, Mario Kart 8, Breath of the Wild, and Wind Waker HD was the 3rd game, and the console for $180, and it was a Wii U Deluxe. So I just went, like, I didn't even think about it really. I just like messaged them, and then I went out and bought it, and I came home and I was like, I don't need this. I own all these games already. I have this console already. Why did I just give someone my money for this?
That's collecting. It's a thrill of the chase. I mean, I recently sold off a PC Engine Duo R, PC Engine with the CD attachment, because I'm like, I never play this thing. Like, I want to be an adult and buy a damn grill for my backyard. What's stopping me? Yeah, nothing really, but I should sell this thing. You know what I mean? It's like, you don't need any of this, you know? But it's nice to have some of it, right?
Yeah.
So I'm going to lend Kayla my one of them first.
Yeah.
So, Tony, whenever we were saying we tend to get off topic, this is exactly what we...
Yeah, I was thinking that. I was like,
I was gonna say, I disconnected, and you guys were answering like your thoughts, and then I came back and I was like, wait, what happened?
Yeah, Kayla, what are your thoughts? Since you happen to be the one who works for Nintendo, give us the juicy details. What are they working on?
Juicy details they probably didn't tell you.
Yeah.
Just say I plead the 5th. You'll be safe.
Yeah.
There you go.
I know you have Miyamoto's number on speed dial.
Heck yeah, I do. See, this is a really weird thing for me, because I'll tell you basically like what I've been taught, because I feel like that doesn't go against anything that I shouldn't be allowed to talk about. So basically, when I first started working for Nintendo, they were really like, push the 2DS XL, push the Nintendo Switch, demo both of them. And throughout the past couple of months here, I've noticed that like the 2DS XL is nowhere in sight. Like, I'm not even asked to bring it with me when I take it to demo. So I'm kind of wondering what's happening there. I don't know. I'm just like, I'm really confused about it all. So personally, like, I feel like they might be trying to ramp up to something else by phasing out the 3DS XL, but not actually having a console to replace it right away. So I'm kind of on the same line of thought where maybe it's going to be something like the Nintendo Switch. However, Nintendo was very... Oh, I thought you guys were all frozen.
Oh, no.
No, we were just like, it was like one of those like...
you guys... Yeah, okay.
What's it called? Yeah, you know. I don't know.
Yeah, anyways.
I don't know words. Go on.
But another thing about like talking about how the Nintendo Switch is going to be replaces the 3DS is that they're really firm in training by saying that the Nintendo Switch is not a portable device. It's a handheld. So that's kind of like just through my training, like that's what I've
portable.
Yeah, right.
You can.
Yeah, it's portable, but it's
Move
not
it.
handheld. So these
They don't
are,
want
like,
their
words that I have to
messaging.
describe it.
They don't want their messaging mixed up
Mm-hmm.
by their employees, so that's why, because they're probably still planning on something. Also, I was just informed by the chat at / the way you say about that you're Canadian. So just to preference what I said before, the 5th is basically saying you're not going to say anything. When I said plead the 5th, it means you're not going to speak to it.
We've watched enough television, Tony.
Okay.
We have another Canadian Holly Wolf.
I was being yelled at in the chat. I'm like, she doesn't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We
Like,
know about. I
Don't
told him
make fun
too
of
in the
me
chat. I
being
said we.
Canadian.
I'm not.
know
I'm like,
about
they
the
were
5th.
making fun of me. 5th, and they're like, she doesn't know.
She
I'm like, all
come
right,
on,
well,
Tony.
shit, I'll explain it.
Yeah.
Don't you love me for being Canadian?
Hey, this isn't about that. It's about my terminology. So, you guys let's whip crack this thing. Let's move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Oh, shit. I
Let's
won't
do
give
this.
my answer. It doesn't matter.
Oh wait, no, I'm sorry. Go on.
Did you not
know it?
I was just when you guys were saying, oh, you know, we ramble on and stuff, and this is a good
we do.
example. I'm like, oh, you know, they need like a mother hen to like
Yeah, just Tony. Just,
like
anyway.
let's go, let's do this thing. But I apologize. You can go ahead.
No, it's
Yeah.
it's funny. In the
So-
chat, Ilya said the GameCube was portable. It had a handle.
And
Right.
had
Yeah.
the screen that you could put on it.
Yeah.
I think I talked about that in the last
True.
podcast, where I would play it like in the back of my dad's truck because we had it connected to his
Oh.
like the cigarette outlet for power.
Oh yeah.
And so I would just flip the screen open on it and sit there and play Harvest Moon.
Nice.
There we go.
I love it. But yeah, I don't think just like what you were saying, Jesse, about the Switch kind of taking over as the handheld market and them having a dedicated home console. Well, in theory, like from a consumer standpoint, that makes sense. Thinking the way Nintendo thinks
Which
is a very different line of like,
Nintendo lives in
logic,
bizarro
you know,
world.
they're- yeah, exactly. They don't live in the same world we do, where their fans live, you know. And so I don't see. Oh, she gone again. I don't see Nintendo doing that with the Switch because kind of what Kayla was saying. They have this very hard stance on like this is our dedicated home console. You can take it on the go and play your home console on the go, but that's what this is a home console. Even though for all intents and purposes, it's a console that has a screen on it and it's controlled. Like design-wise, it's like it's almost the same as like the Game Boy Advance design-wise, you know.
Mhm.
If they do another handheld though, like I really like the clamshell design for handheld consoles. The worst thing is to turn on a console and the controller and you turn it on and one of the thumbsticks was like turned in a direction, you know, and your cursor like gets stuck that way. You know, things like that. I also feel like the Switch is too big to be a dedicated handheld console in my own world of bringing things around with me. But I just don't see Nintendo. Their train of logic just doesn't line up with what you would want them to do in that sense, I guess.
It's Nintendo for
so
you.
we'll probably see, in my opinion, another dual screen console for portable and the Switch. They're gonna continue to really hammer it. This is our home console. Ugh. Anyways, that's all my bit. Tony can crack the whip now.
All right.
But you have to do the action when you.
So, moving on to our second piece of news. Expert reviews, this is where the news comes from, says it is storming here.
Whoa, spooky.
Yeah. Alright, so it says Xbox 2 release date, rumors, multiple consoles, confirmed by Xbox president. The article goes on to say Microsoft is developing the next generation Xbox, and it's making more than one. The Xbox 2 is real. Well, sort of. During Microsoft's E3 2018 conference in June, the tech giant revealed it is well into the process of making a new Xbox. Phil Spencer, executive president of gaming at Microsoft, said his team is already deep into architecting the next Xbox consoles. Consoles, plural. So, this, to me, kind of makes sense. because right now they are pushing the Xbox One, the Xbox One S, and the Xbox One X. So if they want to kind of keep the pattern of having the hardcore gamer console that puts out 4K 60 frames per second, they could have the truly next-gen console or whatever it's going to be, and have that as like the $500 console, kind of like the Xbox One X right now, and then they could have the $300 console that's almost half the price for the casual gamer, or like the mom that's just going out to buy a new console for her kid for Christmas or something like that.
Oh my goodness.
So,
wow.
So Storm.
Yeah.
It's funny, Luigi Blood in the chat said this Microsoft is a scary topic.
Yeah.
The thunder. It's like in the
Back to
movies.
Nintendo, guys.
They're getting upset with this.
Oh no.
So yeah, like what are your guys' thoughts on this? Do you think this is something that Xbox, like, they have to be doing something with multiple consoles, or they wouldn't have said, you know, consoles. So and I think alright, so because I keep getting interrupted, Daniel, why don't you take over?
Oh yeah. Well, okay.
And since
so,
Kayla isn't coming
she's
back,
gone.
I'm gonna
I don't
see
think.
if I
Yeah, I
can
don't
do
think she's
something.
coming back. She's not coming back, man. She ain't coming back. Anyways, so first of all, I really hope they don't call it the Xbox 2. Come on, guys. Please don't call it that. That's Nintendo naming consoles that level of bad. It makes sense to me that they would be working on the next console, because the Xbox One has been out for a few years now. When did it release, actually? 20...
It's been longer than I thought it was when I looked it up.
Oh, what year did it release?
Look at this here.
Xbox One... I want to say 2015, but... you know?
Let's see, it was announced. Okay, I'm going to the Wikipedia page here.
Announced in
Released
2013.
2013 is when it was released. 2013.
No way.
For North America.
That is longer than I thought it was.
Yeah.
I remember it was when I was
Wow.
working. I was working at GameStop on the release day for the Xbox One, and it was crazy because like a week in advance, it was my job to go in back to where they had the stock, and I had to unpack all of the Xbox Ones, and it was just a huge wall of Xbox Ones, and I was like, it's not even out for like a week or two, and I'm staring at something that like millions of people wish they could get their hands on.
Yeah.
I mean,
so
okay, so that shocks me a little bit that it's been out for. So I'm surprised we haven't actually heard more already about this. Come to think of it, although, yeah, coming to think, the span of release dates between Xbox consoles is pretty large overall, but. If they were, now you mentioned about them saying console plural, again, like I would assume it'd be the same thing, like they've got the Xbox One S and then the X, so, you know, it's probably not like multiple generations like the Xbox 2 and then whatever consoles coming out of them, but those sort of half-step generations where it's just an improved hardware update of the same console, in the same vein as the Xbox One S or the new 3DS or that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. This almost seems kind of like, it doesn't seem very surprising to me at all. I don't know. Tony, I'll pass it to you.
Yeah, I mean, my thoughts are pretty much exactly the same on that. I think that you're probably going to get a next generation of Xboxes. You know, the baseline is going to be a slightly beefed up version of the Xbox One X. Mm-hmm. And then you'll get probably I don't know, some other version, and then like a Pro model. You know, maybe you get 3 or maybe you get 2 to start off with, and it's basically just a full step from the Xbox One, half step from the Xbox One X, and you just get 2 of the same thing. I don't think they're going to be like 2 drastically different things, you know.
Right.
So I think it's just sort of variants and models, you know.
Yeah. It would also be interesting if they just kept the Xbox One X, and since it'll be you know, the next gen's going to be such a leap in technical power, maybe the Xbox One X would move down to what the the normal Xbox is now, to where the games are so more technically advanced, technically demanding, that instead of playing games at 4K like the Xbox One X does now, it plays these next-gen games at like 1080p. So all that extra processing power that would be playing current-gen games at like 4K 60 frames per second, which is what it's trying to do, would only be able to output these new games at like 1080p and 30 frames per second. I could see something maybe like that, and then the next true gen would be the one that they're releasing, and they're just like rebranding the Xbox One X, possibly. I don't know. But that's, I think that would be a way for them to kind of save money on like manufacturing costs. If they, since they're already putting out the One X, they could just say like, hey, this will also work with your next generation games, but you're not going to get the full experience as you would with this Xbox 2 or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Right. I just really hope they don't call it that. Xbox 2 is just, that's so confusing. No.
Bring it back to marketing. I got to figure it out.
Yeah, but that one needs to go back to the drawing board.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see here. What about before we move on? Would any of you guys like to see an Xbox handheld at any point?
I don't think Microsoft has really shown any interest in exploring that market at all, though.
Yeah.
I think diehard Xbox fans would, but I don't think the market is there anymore. I mean, Nintendo is the only one that's able to barely hold on, you know, and they did a good job of it, but the PSP, the Vita, like they've crashed. Everything that's attempted to compete with Nintendo has crashed, you know, and burned. I don't think they're going to try to.
We got a super chat.
All right.
Sorry.
$2. Yeah, go ahead and read it, Daniel.
Oh, Jaren G, who's my new best friend. Sorry, Jesse, Tony. You guys are out. Jaren's in. Switch backwards compatible for Wii U Ocarina of Time on Switch. Also, I just unplugged my headphone jack, so you're talking. Here you go. There we go. So is this a question, Jaren, or do you want to? That way, you're like if we'll get the Switch being backwards compatible, or if the Wii will have Ocarina of Time, or on the Switch. I'm gonna need. Yeah, I'm gonna need clarification, dude.
I think. So to answer two questions, Switch backwards compatible for Wii U. I don't think it could be backwards compatible in the sense that it would just be able to, like, buy Wii U games off the eShop, because the whole dual screen interface with some games, like Splatoon, they had to release Splatoon 2 and rework it so it's only one screen instead of the two screens. So there's a lot of games that was dependent on the multiple screens, which right now the Nintendo Switch doesn't have. But with Ocarina of Time, I imagine that coming out on every single Nintendo console that they put out for the next 100 years.
Oh yeah, at the very least, it'll show up on not the Virtual Console, but what are they calling it now? The Nintendo Classics.
Yeah.
It'll probably show up on there when they do their online service. It's funny is when Switch pre-release, I had a really good idea for how they could do it to be backwards compatible, in that if they released like basically a second dock that had a disc drive, and so the dock like Bluetooth connected to the Switch console, and basically you use the Switch console as the gamepad, and then you put the disc into the dock, which is connected to the TV.
That would be interesting.
That was a total pipe dream from 2 years ago that of course never came to fruition. But yeah, I don't think if they do anything, like, I don't see them doing any backwards compatibility anything, just because what they're doing instead is just porting games over.
Yeah.
Like Mario Kart, Donkey Kong Country, Tropical Freeze, Hyrule Warriors, etc. And Breath of the Wild, obviously. So yes, thank you for the donation, though.
We can skip the third news piece and go to the discussion topic, and then we'll do the mailbag, and then we can let Tony go. We can set him free.
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit there. We're moving on to the Zelda topic?
Yeah, we're going to skip the third news story, and then we're going to do the discussion topic, the mailbag, and then we're going to set you free. Back into the wild. Yeah. I'm
having fun. So basically, the topic of discussion was, what if Zelda Ura was released? What if the N64 DD was a success? So that's a lot of ifs there. And I've been asked this before, and I've kind of boiled down what I think would have had to have happened for it to be a success in the first place.
Is this it skipping okay, what if this had happened? Was over 20 years ago, or 22 years ago, the N64 DD had come out and it was a success instead.
Yeah, like 98.
Are we just jumping forward
99.
to how is everything different now, or are we going to go through a little timeline of events and how those are different?
I would say
what's our structure here?
Like a brief timeline of events.
Okay. All right.
I have my full timeline on the wall over there. You can't see it. Exactly every decision that Nintendo would have made differently. Yeah, so I think kind of boils down to a couple different things. I think I actually wrote notes here, so you're going to see me looking at them.
Oh, nice.
But yeah, I think the DD was released in the twilight years of the console, right? And like we mentioned earlier, oftentimes you get revisions toward the end of a console to kind of expand its life, but realistically the DD was intended to be released much earlier and have nearly the full life cycle of the 64 at its disposal. But this did not happen. So essentially it was dead on arrival, right? So they just could not have been successful. It was impossible. They released in Japan practically as a courtesy, and then never released it in the US, and then just it dissipated. No one cared, right? So it would have had to have been released earlier. You also have to keep in mind when it was released, and even when it was kind of when they thought of it, like when they were kind of the inception of the DD, it was already outdated tech. It was interesting tech, but essentially they were using a zip drive that had 60 megabytes on it instead of 100, which was your average zip drive size, right? Mm-hmm. So the 64 megabytes was much bigger than carts at the time, but 64 carts ultimately got to 64 megabytes anyways. So I think like Conqueror's Bad Fur Day is an example of one that maxed out the full size of the cartridge, 512 megabits, 64 megabytes. So basically that particular aspect of it, you could still have the read-write, but the size, which was the big thing, complete with the PlayStation, or compete with the PlayStation, in terms of the size of the discs, no longer mattered toward the end of the life cycle. So realistically, I think for it to have been successful, I think that the N64 would have had to have been the disk drive, meaning that it was never the 64 that we know. Maybe it had a cartridge slot like the Saturn did on top for additional RAM or what have you, but it would have just had to have been a zip drive-based console for it to have been successful, and that was the way that it started at the very beginning, because add-ons are never really successful. They just, in the history of games and gaming consoles, they're rarely ever successful.
Looking at you, Sega.
Yeah. So, Luigi Blood brings up a good point here. We talked about it being in the twilight years of the console. He said by the time the 64 actually released in 1999, the Dreamcast was already released worldwide. You know what I mean? So it's like, what would you rather do? Buy a Dreamcast? Or, maybe wait for the GameCube, or get the 64 DD, right? Assuming it was even released in the US, which it wasn't. So, I think, if you bring in Zelda, if it was released, obviously we would have not been talking about this right now. I think that it would have been a great game. What it would have been is up to speculation. I think we're getting more information about, what was promised and what was ultimately going to be released, but I think that it would have changed the trajectory of how Nintendo dealt with the internet, mostly, because the system was an internet-based, internet-capable machine. RandNet was an internet service. It had email. It was designed to allow you to share pieces of art that you created in the different Mario studios. They had a bunch of other Mario Studio games in development that they never released that would have allowed you to basically piece together a game, kind of like Mario Maker, but like years before, because you basically would be creating a polygon here and a film here and a drawing here, and there was one that was supposed to be music. There was one that was supposed to be a text editor. You know, like why would you need that as just a game by itself? Well, you wouldn't. You know, you'd want to piece it together with other things that you've created, right? So I think if it was successful theoretically, you know, it would have been successful because of its read-write capabilities and the extra space and blah, 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 but it would have been primarily successful because of the interactivity. So what you probably would have seen was a GameCube that had internet access. I think 1 or 2 games maybe did, I don't know. What you probably would have seen is a Wii with a Nintendo that wasn't deathly afraid of the internet. And a Nintendo that wasn't deathly afraid of voice chat, like it still is, more or less, right? You would have seen a Wii U that, same thing, better internet capabilities, voice chat, like, you know, it just would have, I think it would have opened up Nintendo to things like DLC, because Zelda was essentially DLC, but it wasn't downloadable, right? So it's just additional expansion-based content. And Nintendo actively avoided anything like that, really, until Mario Kart 8, you know? Or like that era, like the Wii U era, midway through its life was the first time it really started doing any sort of DLC, right? And it had just spat on the idea of it prior. So I think the idea of Zelda and the idea of the N64 DD failing was put like a phobia into Nintendo. And I think that it set them, really put them off to those concepts. So in terms of a timeline, I don't know, but I really think that you've seen consoles that were more compatible internet-wise and more competitive internet-wise to their contemporaries, like the PlayStation 3, Xbox 360, Xbox, what have you. So there was a very long monologue. I prepared all day for it.
Yes, but I loved it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. So
yeah, and then
oh,
actually,
sorry.
pardon me, I just want to interrupt real quick here. Luigi Blood, he's just the man. He's like, you know, he's talking about the Satellaview in the chat. The Satellaview was essentially like DLC content, right? So it's like they were experimenting, then the DD came out, and then it failed. You know, yes. He also mentioned that the storm calmed down with all the Nintendo talks. We're not allowed to talk about Xbox again. Nice. So, you know, you can kind of see the pattern. They're ramping up toward internet use with the Satellaview, with the DD, and then they're just like, screw it. Never again. So I apologize for interrupting. Go ahead.
No, we were going. I was going to bring up the exact same thing. Comment here about Satellaview, but it makes me think. You know, if you think about what Nintendo was doing net-wise,
we are adding a 4th member to the call, so it makes so like it just helps
like
with
your little
the formatting
layouts. Yeah.
Yes.
Who are we bringing in?
Ilya.
Yeah, our stand-in co-host.
Yeah, and our voiceover person. I asked her and Holly said she was too sweaty, so...
Well, alright then.
Well...
Oh, hello, Ilya.
Hello.
Hi.
Alright.
Oh, she quiet, Ilya.
Quiet?
You're so... I don't know if it's just me.
Maybe
you're so quiet.
Set up correctly.
But yeah, what I'm thinking is... to continue.
Is it better now?
It's good. If it's bad, I can...
It wasn't using my microphone. Now it's using my microphone.
Oh, it's good enough. Don't worry about it. I can adjust it on my end.
Don't listen to Jesse.
I never do. So...
Sorry, you can listen to him.
Well, I'm still on the train of thought here. Thinking about what they were doing with internet access at the time of the Satellaview in Japan, especially competing with the kind of internet stuff that Sega was starting to try and ramp up and do at that time as well. Basically, they would have had to have kept that internet usage as part of their competitive market and keeping up with that. So what we have now and what we were getting with the Wii U as far as internet goes was basically, in my head, like 2 generations behind what it could have been if they had stayed the course.
Mm-hmm.
But we're still stuck in this era of like you said, no voice chat. Friend codes are still a thing, which is a really dated thing that we shouldn't have still. Things like that. And I just feel like what kind of like Nintendo could be doing PlayStation Live or PSN, sorry, and Xbox Live. They could be that level of internet, but they almost in the same way that with the movies, like they saw the Mario Bros. Movie came out, that didn't go so well, and they're like, no, never again. Until only now again, or they're trying to they're dipping their toes in again. But it just makes it gets my brain tingling so much thinking about like what even the GameCube could have been doing at the time with its internet. Because it's not just like, okay, this is something they had going and we're starting to play around with, but it's like this is something they would have had to have stayed competitive in the market with.
Yeah.
Just my thought there.
Yeah, I also want to bring up.
Do you know what we're talking about even? We just jumped back in when you were, coming on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking about stuff that didn't release, so it's okay if you did.
Yes.
If you don't know.
No, I had it going while I was making
Okay,
sure
okay.
Yeah.
presentable.
Well, you
I was
can.
like, there's crap all over my bed.
Right.
Yeah, you can just
So-
listen along and jump in for the ending mailbag.
I guess correction to what I was saying, thanks to Luigi Blood again. Man, we should just bring him on.
Luigi
Because-
Blood.
to tell you-
I did a podcast with him once. It was
Fine.
awesome.
Oh, right on. He said Satellaview does not use internet. It was one-way download, so online play is technically not possible. True. So it was broadcast satellite.
Yeah.
And so at that time, yes. But, that just is like the gateway of internet access.
So you're
right?
talking about the Super Famicom?
Yeah, the
so
Super
that-
Famicom
Because
Teleview.
you did a video a month ago about like a possible N64 disk drive compatible version with the Satellaview or something like that.
Kind of. Just to backtrack a little bit, yeah, I mean, like, Luigi Blood is technically right, it's not the internet, but I generally call it like a proto-internet, because you can get downloadable content, it functions like the internet, but it's not, so yes, technically, that is correct, that is not. But yeah, so the prototype that you're referring to has no name, it has a patent number, was never announced, never released, but basically, it was an N64 add-on. Didn't have a disk drive, anything like that, so it wasn't a DD thing.
Okay.
It was its own entity that would have essentially, theoretically, functioned like a Satellaview or a multimedia device. Not saying that it would have had like a broadcast satellite, it would have been internet connected. It had a hard drive in it, so in theory you could go online, download games. It would function as a cable tuner for your TV, that kind of thing. Not much else is known about it unless you really want to dive in to the specs in the patent. But it was internet capable, but it was prototype. The date on the board of the prototype was 1999. So think about that. The N64 DD was released in 1999. So when it was a prototype, probably 96, right? So you got to imagine, would Nintendo have ever released N64 add-on in like 2002? I really do think that they were just experimenting. I really don't think it had anything to do with anything they were intentionally going to release, but they were just playing around with internet stuff, and probably partially because of the DD failure, they're like, let's not do anything else with this.
Yeah. But I mean, like, if RandNet had continued to exist, this opens the door for so many online possibilities, or what the GameCube could have been doing.
Oh yeah.
And even if even the possibility of more add-ons for future consoles, I think the GameCube does have a add-on slot for the Game Boy Advance connector, but I don't remember if that's exactly what it's called.
I think there's another
Game Boy Player.
There's another add-on I believe lets you connect online for games like Phantasy Star Online on the GameCube. Was online.
Right.
And it had like the
Those
giant keyboard controller.
Are also in kind of a different category than the add-on N64 DD. Like the 64 DD and that other device are like complete system changers, whereas like that didn't really solve an existing need or want. Whereas the Game Boy player is like, hey, you want to play Game Boy on your TV? Yeah, I do. So
Yeah, but I mean, like, even just the fact that that port is there, I don't know, it implies to me there could have been, if the DD had gone well, instead of the Game Boy connector, who knows what else they started adding on to every console, for goodness sakes. Like, if it had gone well, you know, they like to kind of play the course for what's working with them at times. So.
And if it doesn't work, they get super skittish.
Oh yeah,
and think about 3D. Think about the Virtual Boy. You know, like, it failed, and they didn't try 3D again until the 3DS. And the Virtual Boy was released in like '95, I think. Yeah, it was somewhere around '95, so, and they didn't mess with that again for like a decade and a half.
Yeah,
or more. I don't remember when the 3DS came out, but a long time.
I think it was 2000. I want to say 10 or 11.
I think so. Yeah,
something around that range. So, yeah, I mean,
about a decade and a half.
They got spooked.
Yeah. So the a second part of this, we talked a little bit about how would the Nintendo consoles or the Nintendo landscape be if the disk drive was a success. But if the disk drive was a success, that would have meant games like Zelda would have released, and then wasn't there a Mario 64 2 that was planned for the disk drive as well, or is that speculation?
The Mario 64 2 never really got far. Miyamoto had said that it was like they had created like a working demo, and it was kind of not super functional because they were trying to do 2-player, and they kind of scrapped it. I don't recall that being for the DD. I could be wrong, but I don't think it was scrapped. Even if it was for the DD, it wasn't scrapped because of the DD. It was scrapped because what they were trying to implement couldn't be done on the N64 properly.
Mm-hmm. All right, that's what I was, because I remember something. I don't know if it was an article by someone who was trying to look up information secondhand, or if it was an actual interview from like a first-hand source like Miyamoto, but I thought I seen something where they mentioned the reason that it was on the disk drive was for the extra processing power to allow it to be multiplayer.
The DD doesn't really give you extra processing power. It has a 32-bit coprocessor, but the games aren't. And Luigi Black can probably speak a little bit more technically to this, but the N64 DD does require the expansion pack, so you have that. It does give you more space than the average cart, and it does give you read-write capabilities. So basically that meaning that you can change the game environment to your liking, like a God simulator like Goshen, but it doesn't really give you any more power, I don't believe.
I think the big change is that read-write capability, because you mentioned before, and as we've mentioned in past podcasts talking about Zelda, if you cut grass, it would stay cut, for example. Or I think Miyamoto mentioned in interviews like leaving footprints in the sand. Oh my lord, leaving footprints in the sand, and it then kind of like staying there. Even though I feel like that would be, in my opinion, a huge waste of space, because even in modern games they disappear after a bit. But I digress. That capability, that's the big change between what the N64 can already do versus what Zelda promised, and other than the additional content as well, which I think as far as the extra space goes, it's more just that you've got the storage that's on the cart and then also the storage that's on the disc, not so much the extra processing power, which is like kind of a beast into itself, though I'm far less of the expert than Tony. But that's as far as my understanding goes.
That's why we have Tony here. So another thing that I was wanting to touch on was if every fan wishes Zelda would have released, but if it would have, that would have meant a lot of people's favorite Zelda games would have either not existed or have been completely different, because Miyamoto's gone on interviews saying that some of the dungeons that were scrapped from Zelda were like broken apart and reused in later games like Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and ideas were reused and everything. So, and especially with Majora's Mask, I think it was made out of necessity from Aonuma, where he wanted to work on another Nintendo 64 game because there were so many ideas that was left out from Ocarina of Time's Ura expansion. And
Right.
Miyamoto wanted to just move on and work on something for the GameCube. So they made the deal that if they could finish it within 1 year, then they could work on the second 64 game, which ended up becoming Majora's Mask.
Miyamoto,
So-
the current gen game killer. That's
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we're gonna work on another game, and he's like, no,
So
we're doing the next generation.
yeah. So Tony, do you think if Ura would have released, would that have erased Majora's Mask from history?
Most likely, yeah. Because they likely utilized ideas like, yeah, the whole mask thing, it originated in Ocarina of Time. You probably wouldn't have gotten that. The reason why it was created is because the developer was getting bored with kind of recreating a game, you know, versus doing something new, right? So Majora's Mask really spawned from boredom with Ura Zelda, right? I think that probably would have erased Majora's Mask, honestly. I mean, maybe we would have gotten something like it down the line, possibly, but I don't think it would have been the same thing.
Yeah, and then
Because the resources would have been spent elsewhere, right?
Yeah.
yeah, that was I believe the reason they were able to build the 4 dungeons within that year was because a lot of the puzzles and stuff was just repurposed from Ura, so they were able to quickly get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And then he said,
Well, they've said. Sorry.
oh, I
Keep going.
was actually going to say the same thing that you were about to say, I believe. So
Which was.
okay, if I am a mind reader, you were going to say how Aonuma Miyamoto said that it was reused for later games as well.
Yes.
So
He is a mind reader, folks.
yeah, so that would have, you know, a domino effect would have happened to where Wind Waker might have been a bit different, Twilight Princess could have been a bit different, and then yeah, like it would have just kept going, and then maybe by the time we got to Skyward Sword, things would have equaled out to where, you know, it would have been similar to the game that we have now, or without Majora's Mask, it could have just completely changed all of the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of getting
Kind of that butterfly effect, and it just ripples into the whole rest of the series.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
Hard to speculate, you know, but
Yeah.
it's probably something like that would have happened.
all right, I guess we're ready to move on to the mailbag if everybody else is good. Does anyone else
Sure.
have anything to add?
don't
I
think
did
so.
look up when the Virtual Boy came out, July 21st, 1995. You were
Nice.
right. It was 1995. It was
Nice.
like
Yes.
almost an exact month after I was born, which someone in the chat was
Whoa.
like,
Oh
"You
my
made me feel
god.
old." I'm like, sorry.
How I don't want to do math right now. I don't want
So, did you say July 1st?
July 21st.
Oh, 21st. So
Okay.
the Virtual Boy is
It's
almost 23.
years old.
Wow.
I have a Virtual Boy in my.
I'm going. I'm leaving. I'm old. I can't deal
Old
with
man
this.
Tony.
So old.
Old man Tony going to
So
town.
damn old. Every time I meet someone in their 20s, first off, I don't personally believe anyone could be born in the 90s. But I guess it's true.
I don't believe anyone could
Uh-oh.
be born in the early 2000s. That shocks me.
That always.
Yeah, I know.
gets me.
So, but
I know
just
someone-
I just
Oh.
want you to do me a favor, okay, young lady,
Okay.
and just
Sure.
enjoy your 20s. Okay, you just take life and grab onto it. Okay, because you're only 20 for 10 years or so, and
No, I'm
you
playing
You're
gotta
only 20 for
you gotta
1 year.
treasure every damn moment. Okay, you just
I will try.
when you wake
I've
up.
already sacrificed 3 years of it, but
one horrible day when you wake up in the morning and you take your last breath as a 20-year-old and you become a 30-year-old, you'll realize exactly what I mean. So just enjoy.
Oh.
than Daniel, am I?
It's so funny that I had this coworker once. I was her supervisor, and we're talking about it. And she mentioned that she was born in '98. And
That's weird.
I was
Not
like,
good.
oh no, I remember '98. It was a good year. I remember playing Zelda and just like
Same.
And it's just
because that's when Zelda came out, or Ocarina of Time did.
Yeah. Well, exactly. Ocarina of Time is what I was talking to her about, and then she was like, "No, I have that game." Girl,
I think
sit
you
down.
cut out there for a second.
You cut out for a second.
Oh, just
She said,
and then I was
have
telling her
that
about.
game.
Yeah, and she's like, "No, I have that game. I played on my 3DS. It's not that old." And I'm like, we need
That's
to talk.
A remaster. You don't understand.
You're fired. No.
No, I like the people that call Ocarina of Time the first Zelda game. They aren't aware of the ones that came before.
Yeah. By the way, there's a comment.
And had that issue.
There's a couple comments here in the chat that say what Tony says is. So just.
Oh yes.
Just.
Everyone is.
I am the old man in the cave giving you the sword. Okay.
Yeah.
You listen to the old man
I have
now.
a poster that says you should go alone, but it's not. It's a Zelda crossover with something else, so it doesn't actually say. It does say take this, but it's a different image.
All right. So I guess we can move on to the mailbag. Before we get started, everybody that's watching, you 32 people, I think we had more watching while we were getting set up, but then they just left because of all the technical issues. So
all right.
for the 32
Should've
people who
stayed
stayed, thank you. All right. So since this is the mailbag, should have gave one for the discussion topic as well. I'm going to do a new intro because it'll go up as a separate video. So is everybody ready?
Everybody's
All
ready.
All right. Again, people in the chat, just get your questions in there so we can go through and pick them. All right. What's up, everybody? I am Jesse, or Game Over Jesse, as all of you may know me. Here with us is Daniel.
Hello.
Ilya.
Guten Abend.
And joining us for the first time on a podcast, but not the channel, is Tony from Hard4Games.
Hey guys.
Yes. So this is the Zelda mailbag, where we answer all of your Zelda or Nintendo gaming questions. You can leave them in the video below. I just seen someone in the chat says I love this podcast. Thank you.
Ooh, thanks, dude.
Oh, good.
Caught my attention. So yeah, you can leave your questions in the comments below, or you can join our Discord and leave them. We have a special chat now for the Zelda mailbag, so you can leave your questions in there. It's a lot easier for us to gather them up. And if you want your question guaranteed to be answered on the podcast, you can go to patreon.com/GameOverJesse, where just a single $1 will get you a guarantee for your question to be read, among many other things, with all of the tiers there. And Hard4Games, I believe you have your own Patreon where people can go and support you as well. What kind of stuff could they find there?
Well, we do a Patreon-only Discord. We also have different rewards where we have, I don't know, 3D modeled Hard4Games logos for tiers that we send out to people, and little gifts, and signed cartridges, and little goodies depending on what people are capable to give, and occasionally the Patreon-only video.
Yeah. I remember.
I want that little joystick there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want that. You've got my little collector's.
I got a couple in the back over there too that are small.
Here. You got it like in the back of my brain. This is like, I want that.
No, see, it was
for the collection.
It was kind of funny. One month I became a Patreon of Hard4Games, and Tony just messaged me. He was like, "Hey, are you sure about this?"
Well,
Do you remember that message?
I do remember that. I thought it was a mistake because I'm because we've been talking for a while. I wasn't expecting you to just start donating to the show, so I saw it, and then I saw that it was it was a generous. I think it was one of the top tiers that we offer, if I recall properly. So I was just like,
damn, Jesse.
Like, are you you feeling okay? You sure you want to support a show called Hard4Games? We had a heart-to-heart regarding it, but ultimately he did want to regarding it. But ultimately he did want to support the show, and we really appreciated it. So thank you.
So how much is it for that little joystick?
We do. There's like a 1, 5, 10, and 20. tier, and generally we have people, if it's like a physical gift that we give out, every Patreon supporter can do the the videos and the Discord, but normally we'll have people on for about 3 months or so, and then on the 3rd month we'll send out a joystick. But if you guys want one, we'll talk.
Yeah, I think I think I pledged up for the $20 whenever I joined on the Patreon. I don't know if I was a Patreon before that at a smaller tier, and then I upgraded.
I'd have to check.
Yeah.
I am also not the person who runs I run the Patreon, but I don't run the front end of it or the back end of it. So we also have another person who has like all the spreadsheets and stuff, and like does all of the stuff that I don't have time to do because I'm too busy editing. So
yeah. So everybody, you can go and support Hard4Games if you love.
That's really what the channel's called.
Yeah,
Hard4Games. Just search on YouTube, Hard4Games. We have tons of retro gaming content, beta content, Nintendo development content, lamenting about how we're over 30 content. Just desperately wishing we weren't every slow and painful day. But anyways, yeah, check it out, guys. It's great. Good stuff. You're going to love it.
So, our Zelda mailbag officially starting. I'm going to the list for the questions. We can try to get through these quickly. If we can all do 2 questions. If it drags on, then we're only going to be able to do 1 question each. So, the first question. Alright. Coming from Jonna. I don't know how to pronounce the name. Jonah Tungalarts. Jonah Tungalarts?
Angular. I don't know, man.
Yeah, that guy. That guy.
Tungalarts?
Yeah. So
I don't know.
That guy or girl says, would you rather have a Breath of the Wild sequel or a return to traditional Zelda? So this implies that if there is a Breath of the Wild 2, it keeps the Divine Beast shrine aspect as opposed to adding in traditional dungeons to the sequel. So, starting with you, Tony. Have you been able to play through Breath of the Wild?
I have. I haven't played the DLC, which is ironic because I'm Zelda, but I have played the whole game, yes. So the question is would I want a sequel game that essentially follows the exact same formula?
Yeah. That's how I'm going to take it. Because personally, I would like a mix of both. Like, Breath of the Wild had 120 shrines and 4 divine beasts. So I say, give us 5 or 6. Like, Majora's Mask only had 4 main dungeons. I think Wind Waker had 6. So give us, like, somewhere between Majora's Mask and Wind Waker. Like, actual dungeons that are, like, fire dungeon, water dungeon, and then cut the amount of shrines in half. That way, you get the best of both. But I'm looking at this as you either get one or the other. So.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So, okay, no, I can't cheat and go down the middle,
Yeah.
like you said. Okay, so for me, I'm fine with the shrines. Honestly, I thought Breath of the Wild was a stellar game, and the way that I play games nowadays are in short bursts. Okay, I got a toddler. He's running around. He's grabbing my Switch from me. He's, we're playing, we're doing stuff. I have moments at a time. So, rocking a whole dungeon, not always even possible. Okay, so for me, as a parent, give me them shrines. Like, let me knock them out in like 20 minutes each, or 10 minutes, or whatever they are, 5 minutes sometimes.
Yeah.
I'm totally down with that.
And you still have those divine beasts for when you do have the time.
Yep. Sure. And maybe they switch around the shrines to have like a different feel or theme based on the game, so it's not just like, okay, you go into the same type of looking shrine, it has the same layout, the whole Sheikah stuff everywhere. You can have different feelings to it. Just, I like the aspect of having it short, sweet, move on.
All right. Were you a fan of the, since obviously you were a fan of the dungeon design in Breath of the Wild, were you a fan of the story?
Yeah,
or,
I loved it. I think a lot of people didn't like it. But Zelda never had a deep story. It's not like a Final Fantasy game where eat and dialogue. you know, or like Metal Gear Solid, where you're watching endless, you know, cutscenes and you know, constantly listening to conversations. It's always been thin. I think part of Zelda's story has always been the atmosphere, because the atmosphere complements the story. And you know, it's the same. It's with Majora's Mask. The mini stories that you encounter are these ideas of desperation and hopelessness, and the atmosphere is this moon coming down to kill you, right? In Breath of the Wild, you know, the story is that you wake up in a land that you don't recognize because you died, and it's vast and it's kind of scary and it's huge, and you have to kind of explore it almost as if it's the first time, right? So the story is kind of sparse because you kind of don't know what's going on, and I was fine with that. Now, would I want the exact same story again? No. But did I like the story of Breath of the Wild? Yes, because it married with the atmosphere perfectly, in my opinion.
What was really cool about the storytelling in Breath of the Wild is, as the gamer, you are learning everything as Link is relearning it as well. Whereas in Wind Waker, he's already got all of this knowledge that we aren't aware of. Or Twilight Princess, it's the same thing. He already knows who the characters are, but in Breath of the Wild, he doesn't know who the old man or the king is. He doesn't know who Zelda is. He doesn't know who anyone is. So we discover along with him, which I think brings Miyamoto and Aonuma are always talking about. They want Link to be a character that the player can directly connect with, and I think that was the best way to do it in this case. So what you were saying with wanting a different type of story, you would likely get that if they did have part 2, because in part 1 it is him trying to figure out everything. So in part 2 he's already remembered everything. Maybe he could go to a different land, like Majora's Mask went to Termina. The Link's Awakening sequel to A Link to the Past went to Hylian Island. So maybe he could go to a different land and tell a similar story to like Majora's Mask or Link's Awakening, but for the most part, like, it would be a different story, so I don't think you would have to worry about it being the same, being told.
I get what you're saying.
Yeah, and you mentioned that a lot of people complain about the story in Breath of the Wild, or a lot of people don't like it. Or not that they don't like it, but that it's too, like, not enough story for them. And the people that I've seen complain about that have mentioned, or at least the ones that I've reached out to talk to, have mentioned that they went to the Divine Beasts, maybe did a few side quests, and then went to kill Ganon. And if you do that, then there's almost no story, because you just see like maybe 4 or 5 cutscenes and that's it. But if you go get all of the memories, you go to all of the Divine Beasts, you go kill Ganon, you go do all of the side quests, kind of like in Majora's Mask, like you were saying, you learn the story from all of the different characters and stuff. So
the story is what you make of it.
Yeah. And whereas, sorry to cut you off. I was going to say, you also mentioned Final Fantasy. Like Final Fantasy gives you like a 10 to 15 minute cutscene like every 30 minutes, it seems. So like the story is just shoved in your face, whereas in Breath of the Wild, it's up to you to go out and learn things by yourself. But yeah, was there anything else that you wanted to add to yours? We can move on to Ilya.
Oh no, I've talked for too long.
All right. So Ilya, Breath of the Wild 2 or a traditional Zelda game on Switch?
Well, I'm in the same boat that I would want something that's kind of down the middle, but I guess it depends on, because I'm assuming when they're saying Breath of the Wild 2, they're meaning like a sequel, because it's been talked about extensively, I think, by Zelda fans, that we would love to see the backstory of like a prequel. We all want that, but if we're assuming that it's a sequel, if it did something like with Majora's Mask, or what Phantom Hourglass did as a sequel where it goes somewhere else, then probably I would go with that, just because, I mean, obviously I've enjoyed every Zelda game that I've played. There's never been one that I was like, this sucks, and I just stopped playing it forever. Well, Zelda 1 is still giving me issues, but...
Did you get to the first dungeon?
No, I need to go through
I gave you the instructions on how to find it. You go up a square, left a square.
Have you played?
Up a square, right a square, right a square, up a square, and left a square.
You've played Zelda 1, haven't you, Tony?
What's that?
You've played the first Zelda?
Yeah. I didn't play it on original hardware. But I do understand her difficulty with it.
Directionless.
You kind of have to know what you're doing already if you're not going to spend a million years on it.
I do like exploring,
but it's fun.
Pseudo nostalgia feel because obviously I wasn't alive when the game came out. I think
my advice is just to have a map. Like don't go through a walkthrough or anything, but just a map of the world and where the dungeons are. And the rest is its own challenge.
Bomb every
But I mean,
wall
that
you see.
being said, I've never not enjoyed a Zelda game, but Breath of the Wild, the way it was set up, because to be fair, all of the Zelda games I've played except 2 of them, I had seen my brothers play previously, so I had an idea of what I was doing. A Link Between Worlds was the first time I just jumped into a Zelda game not knowing anything about it. Oh no, Twilight Princess as well. But Breath of the Wild, I jumped in and I still cannot get enough of it. So I would say more of the Breath of the Wild route. But if I can cheat a little, I do want the themed dungeons. I love the Divine Beast. I love them to death, and they do have certain themes of their own because the Divine Beasts are naturally different. But I want more of the themes. So that's what I would say on that. I cheated a little bit, but...
Alright. Daniel.
Yeah, so if I can add kind of further to what you guys were talking about with the story structure, one thing I really like as well is that a lot of the story in Breath of the Wild, because of the way they built it, is optional. So if you're someone like me, who I'm like very into the story and the lore and stuff, like we'll go out of our way to find all the memories and everything, collect all of the story elements, read all of the the Zora stone tablets, get all the history and everything. And that is woven, Metroid Prime style, just woven into the world itself. But if you're someone who just would rather try and build a flying machine and, stack boxes and abuse the physics of the game or speedrun to Ganon or whatever, those are also just as viable ways to play the game. So for me, like, I love that. Other Zelda games, which obviously, I'm a big Zelda fan. I fell in love with Zelda games long before the days of Breath of the Wild. A Link to the Past being my first Zelda game, my one true love. And, I have got that soft spot for the traditional Zelda game layout because there's sort of a natural progression of things. But I have to say, Breath of the Wild style of world building and storytelling and everything, like I put 500 hours into that game for a reason. Like I adore it. It just captured me in a way that a Zelda game I don't think has in years. So I think that, like, in a sense, it was kind of the new like big wow moment. Growing up playing like the past, and you play like a 3D Zelda game for the first time, and you're just like, whoa, and this was like that next time that I got to be like, whoa, while playing a game, since I was like a little kid, right? Yes, I would also like more, not necessarily even the theme dungeon. I just want the dungeons to be longer, maybe a bit more in depth. The structure of the game where you've got your like kind of 4 main dungeons and like a ton of shrines and stuff. Like, I like the shrines, and they're like bite-sized, but I think I would like a little bit more out of them. Because there were some shrines that were longer, and they were really good. And then there were some that were like, stack these boxes, and then climb up them, and then you made it. Good job, here's your spirit orb. So, yeah, but really, like, I really love that they ramped up the difficulty, so, especially at the beginning of the game. Obviously, I think you get a little OP pretty quick on, but that's the style, the way the game was built, the fact that because I like change, I like things being progressive and different, and they just really changed it up. So I think that we've had like 30 years of traditional Zelda games, as it were. I'm fine with having another in the style of Breath of the Wild. Thank you for attending my lecture. Please like and subscribe.
Alright, Tony, would you like to choose our next question, or were you able to find one yet? If not, we can move to Ilya to pick a question, and then you can.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. So there should be
No,
some.
I actually-
sock over Daniel's microphone.
I'm sorry?
There is something over your
Oh
microphone.
yeah, it's a
What
sock.
is it?
It's a sock.
What about the pop?
Yeah, I was concerned. There was a bit of pop happening earlier, but I put the sock on. I think that's helped reduce that. So.
No, what do it? Yeah, they're. I'm not sure. Because I had originally wrote some thoughts down on the earlier document. I'm not sure if they still exist on the current document. Is the one about the favorite side quest still in the Google Doc?
Oh, you can go ahead and answer that. That's one that's frequently asked. So.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Okay, this is from Michael Swanson. It says, what's your favorite side quest in the series, and what's your favorite from Breath of the Wild? And so my favorite was that, in terms of the side quest, was the beaver race in Majora's Mask.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I like that one.
It was a lot of
good.
fun, and it was totally different. You know, it was very silly. Like it was a nice little bit of fresh air in a very dark game. And also just Majora's Mask, like the kind of multi-tiered side quest of getting all the masks so you can get Fierce Deity Mask. You know, it was probably, if you could count that as being a side quest, that would be probably another one. My favorite side quest in Breath of the Wild was Breath of the Wild, because that entire game is a series of side quests, realistically. And that's the best I could think of in terms of my favorite side quest for Breath of the Wild. But no, really probably trying to get just some of the different upgrades to the armor are kind of like side quests, and I had a lot of fun with that.
Yeah, trying. Yeah, that is true. Because you have to collect all the different pieces to take to the fairy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Ilya, do you have a question that you found?
Oh, we're not all answering. Well, we did. I think three of us
We've
actually
done that
answered before.
question.
Well, Daniel and
Numerous
I
times.
have answered.
Probably.
I think you answered it last time.
I think I did. I would change one thing though. I changed my Breath of the Wild one to finding all the stones in Zora's domain. Anyway, because I like finding out the story. So.
Oh.
Oh, I had a question. I hope it didn't disappear.
Womp womp. Do you have the
Okay.
Google Doc?
It's actually from YouTube.
Okay.
I found
From
it again. Just-X asks, question. What Zelda game would you want re-released onto the Switch with upgraded graphics, gameplay,
Ooh.
and all
Oh, I
caps
know
voice
Jesse's.
acting?
I know Jesse's answer already.
And thinking on that, I realized was much more difficult than I thought it was going to be, because I'm like, oh, what game would you update like that I don't want to say voice acting would ruin it, but that you'd have to be careful about it, because Breath of the Wild was almost built to make the voice acting okay. And I'm like, so my first thought was Link's Awakening, because I never stopped talking about that anyway, because I feel like maybe a 2D game might be more justified because it'd already be revamped entirely to become 3D. So I think that would be my choice. And I just want to hear, I mean, because there are some parts where there's like narration or whatever, so I just
Right.
wondered if there'd be any sort of narration for, you got a Marin, is this your big chance? I'd just be curious.
That's a pretty reasonable explanation for the why you would want it, you know, because it's so different anyways that why not
Yeah.
add it, you know?
You have
So when you
a
say updated
video.
graphics, though. Oh,
Oh, I was just gonna give Tony a quick shout out. You have
Oh,
a
yeah.
game on your channel about a 3D Link's Awakening fan
Yes.
project.
There is a fan project that I have to be careful what I say about this.
isn't it all kind of on the DL
Oh,
fan?
Should we not talk about it? Should I delete this part?
Here's what I can say is that there's a video on my channel that talked about a very exciting fan project that put Link's Awakening in this sort of pastel type Ocarina of Time world, and that's all I know about it.
And it's beautiful.
And it's
I'm
beautiful.
looking it
It
up
just
now
looks
because I
really
love
good.
Link's Awakening.
All right. So what were you saying, Daniel?
Oh right. So on the note of upgraded visuals for that, Ilya, are we talking like a Link Between Worlds upgraded visuals, or like 3D Breath of the Wild or Twilight Princess sort of move it like, well, technically Link Between Worlds is 3D, but like that
Right,
shift into 3D,
but it's still top down.
or
Well,
like
corner
that's still
down.
top down, but with an update in the same vein as the Link Between Worlds.
Well, normally when I think about Link's Awakening being updated, I do think of the Link Between Worlds, but
Mhm.
because there's that caveat in his question, or hers, I'm actually not sure, that says with voice acting, and if I'm imagining voice acting and cutscenes, I mean, I guess you could, yeah, you do have cutscenes.
You could, I mean, because you've still got those cutscenes in like
and
Link Between Worlds.
Link Between Worlds. I was thinking that maybe it needs to be regular 3D, but no, I'll stick with my usual answer of a Link Between Worlds style.
With our chibi links.
Yeah. All the
Nice.
cheeky looking characters. And I think like all of the characters like Marion and all of that would look good in that form. Yeah.
I mean, she looked good in Hyrule Warriors still, you know, but
Oh yeah, I have seen her in that. I found that dress pattern somewhere. I was this close to spending too much money.
I always
Alright.
spend too much money.
I have to pay student loans. I can't do it.
I will say Skyward Sword because I am currently replaying through it, and I suddenly, desperately want Skyward Sword HD. And hopefully they can fix some of the issues with it as well. Maybe add more to it. I don't know. Like they
Like, are you talking like an extra dungeon like Twilight
well,
Princess HD?
yeah.
Or
So
kind of dungeon.
that's what I was gonna say. Is in Wind Waker HD and Twilight Princess HD, they fixed some of the issues. Like they shortened the Triforce quest in Wind Waker HD.
Yeah, which
Twilight-
I actually did not like.
Yeah, Twilight Princess HD, they shortened the Tears of Light quests. I think you have to get 9 instead of 12 or something like that. And they added in the new dungeon if you have the amiibo. So if they could, like, even if it was slightly barren and only had kind of like Ocarina of Time's Hyrule Field where it was just Lon Lon Ranch and that was basically it. If they had something like that for an overworld in Breath of the Wild, or not Breath of the Wild, Skyward Sword that connected the 3 provinces and let you ride around on Epona or whatever, that would be cool. Like they wouldn't even, like the time that they spent working on the new dungeon for Twilight Princess, if they just spent that working on a new overworld. I think
So
that
just
would
like
be-
put it like a little entrance to like a, not necessarily Hyrule Field because Hyrule's not like established as a kingdom yet, but essentially a Hyrule Field in the same vein as Ocarina of Time's
yeah,
sort of the middle of the map where there's right now there's just kind of a gap in the map.
yeah.
That kind of okay.
And then I think voice acting would already work for the game because there's a lot of dialogue. It's, I think, one of the most dialogue-heavy Zelda games anyways. But moving on to you, Tony.
It's also got the good story for it. Just want
Yeah.
to throw that in there.
Skyward Sword is a good choice because it's really at the time where everyone was expecting voice acting, and we didn't get it. And Nintendo was still being very Nintendo at the time, where it was like, hey, you know, you got this item. I know you've gotten 50 of them, but let me stop the gameplay to
Let's tell
explain.
you all about this.
So there's a lot of room for
Poor
improvement,
Phoebe.
but at risk of I don't want to copying that answer, but I think the 2D games, I think graphically are kind of beautiful the way they are. You know, it'd be interesting to see a 3D remake of them. I think that Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time worked well as remakes because the N64 was just so rudimentary in its 3D that it was nice to see something polished up, a higher poly count, and all that stuff. So I would say, although I never played Phantom Hourglass, and I only played half of Spirit Tracks because I didn't really care for it, and I'm probably going to piss off your fan base here, but I think that those games could probably most benefit from a complete revamp because 3D on the DS was crap. And they did a lot with the art style, right? And they did a lot with what they had available, but you could probably do something pretty special with those games, and Nintendo would probably be less afraid to change them because they're not as beloved, right? So you could really modify, enhance, upgrade in many different ways.
Yeah. That's funny, I was thinking about saying Spirit Tracks, but gonna have to change my answer now.
I would
I was originally thinking about saying it as a joke, but then I'm like, yeah, actually, maybe.
No, legitimately. I really love Spirit Tracks.
Yeah.
Phantom
I'm sorry.
Hourglass is good too, but so no,
I thought
good
they
answer.
would have been the perfect games to remake for the Wii U, since it already had like
Sure,
the
yeah.
screen going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's not. It doesn't have to be dual screen. That's the only thing, you know. Like
No.
the way, honestly, if you're using the other screen, like for example, one of the things you use the dual screen for in Phantom Hourglass and Spirit Tracks is writing on the map, for example.
Yeah.
When you do that, you essentially pause the game anyway, because it switches screens, which screen has the map on it, and you pause the game.
I feel like.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. I feel like, because again, I haven't played Phantom Hourglass, but I played a good chunk of Spirit Tracks. I feel like, at least with Spirit Tracks, they were trying so hard to make it, like, take advantage of everything the DS had to offer, that I would be fighting bosses, and I have to be like, okay, let me switch my item, and then I blow the thing. Oh, I'm dead. Like so much stuff where it'd be like, it became tedium, right? Because they were trying to take advantage of like just utilizing the bottom screen and like, playing with the stylus, that just screw it. Like, screw it all. Like, just make that game without any of that crap.
And honestly, that's kind of what holds it back a little bit, because there's so much in that game that's really good. Like having the Phantom as a companion character when Zelda takes control of them. The whip as an item, I think, was done in Spirit Tracks better than it was in Skyward Sword. Not to bash on it in Skyward Sword, because in Skyward Sword it's used for one of my favorite boss fights ever, but it's in Zelda at least. But there's so much, like, the story of that game is actually really fun. The villains are really fun characters. I really like them, and there's a lot of really good world building in that game. And it's just such an overlooked game. So many people just forget about it.
And that's why I had to stop playing, because I couldn't get past the controls, and like it was almost wasted on the DS. I hate to say that, but I mean, kind of it was. But the
music's also really pretty in that game.
Oh yeah, the music is really good.
I mean, the music
is way
in
better
Zelda
than Phantom
game,
Hourglass.
but I mean, still.
Yeah. All right. So before Daniel answers, I have a quick question for Tony. So last week we had Patricia, the voice of Zelda, on the podcast.
It was awesome. I'm sorry.
Next week we're having Joe, who is the voice of Daruk in Breath of the Wild, one of the champions. And the following weeks we're having the other champions, voice actors, on the podcast as well. So how does it feel for you to be in the middle of all those people?
Yeah, I'm kind of the guy that wasn't important invited, so that's exciting.
You were on our calendar first, though. You were like in our.
Or are you saying that I'm like equivalent to one of them because I'm like on that? Oh, I get it now. I'm just poking fun at you. I don't.
We're not saying you're our filler contents here.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. No, it feels good. I'm happy to be on the podcast. It's fun. Who doesn't like chatting about Zelda?
All right. So Daniel, did you get your?
No. So
you were going to pick Spirit
This
Tracks.
was a toss-up. I was thinking about it. But okay. While we're on the thought of overlooked games, this is almost a cop-out, because when we were talking about re-releasing games last time, I also said this, but I'm gonna say as sort of but change it up a little bit, sort of a little collector's pack sort of deal. Zelda 1 and 2 re-release with art style not fully like 3D models or whatnot. I think still like sprite based is still probably would work better for these games, but still updated, maybe especially with things like the lighting and stuff. You could do just think how amazing Octopath Traveler looks. Like, I love the visuals of that game. So give us some nice clean updates with the looks there. Put a map in Zelda 1 that actually works, and maybe clean up the translation problem, things like that. Maybe give it a little bit more. Don't keep the brutality and the challenge. I like that stuff. Everyone knows I like to get punished a little bit, but just give a little bit more direction to the player of what they're supposed to be doing, and give that update. And even though there's not a lot of dialogue in those games, I'm not opposed to voice acting if that's what you wanted to do. But I think so many people are Zelda fans and have never played Zelda 1 and 2 on the NES, or their subsequent re-releases. And it's just not something that's as readily available as other games that have had tons of re-releases and stuff. Sure, there's like eShop or Virtual Console. It'll probably come to the Nintendo Classics when the Switch Online service goes up, but there's just not as much. You won't walk into a game shop and see it on the shelf. And like Tony, you said before, people think that Ocarina of Time is the first Zelda game. That breaks my heart. So
I don't know if I said that, but yeah, a lot of people do.
Oh, that was you, Jesse. But yeah, and like I have a friend who's a teacher, and he's quoted students saying that, and he's like, actually, that's not the case.
By the way, before I forget, it's not quite this, but the original Zelda and the original Second Quest did have an update, a 16-bit update on the Satellaview.
I have it,
which you can download. Okay.
Oh my god.
He's like, boom, he's off.
He bought the fan-made cartridge.
I did it again. That I unplugged my headphones, but I always get excited talking about this. This is BS: The Legend of Zelda on a reproduction cart for the Super Nintendo.
Yeah.
That my brother, he's really into getting ROM hacks and stuff like that and repro carts. So he got me this for Christmas one year. And God, it's like super exciting. Just the art, I don't know what we got here. Some original artwork with the Kokiri sword for some reason, but I mean the label is like a really cheap fake label, but it's a legit cart that works on original hardware for the Super Nintendo, and it's just really exciting that he even was able to get that ROM of BS Zelda. So that just gets me psyched up all the time.
You like jumped. You like leapt out of your chair.
I'm like, I always get excited about it. Yes, BS Zelda was really cool. We're going back to the Satellaview now, almost. With,
it goes
release,
full circle.
Yes.
All right, so Daniel, would you like to take us to our final question?
Oh boy, I should have been looking at the questions. Yes. So, I think a lot of these questions, I didn't finish cleaning them up before we actually started.
Right. Does anyone in the chat have a question?
If, I think I did see some questions.
There are a few good ones in the chat.
Yeah. So while Daniel's looking, Tony, tell us a little bit more about your channel.
Okay. Well, we review retro games as most people do, but the twist is we take a look at a lot of beta stuff. People send us things to take a look at that haven't necessarily been released, and sometimes people send us stuff to verify whether or not it's really truly a beta or whether it's just a fake. So, for example, Zelda related, we were sent. I traded for in this particular case. Oftentimes we're sent stuff. A prototype beta version of Wind Waker on an NR disc, I have some behind me, but basically they're writable GameCube dev discs, and it had differences in the title screen, and it was online as being a beta and all this, but turns out it was fake. So we did some gaming sleuthing and figured it out and was able to prove something to make sure that future people don't get duped, basically. So we do a lot of that kind of gaming archaeology, gaming detective work on my channel, in addition to the reviewing and streaming and being silly.
Nice. And then it's Hard4Games on
YouTube, probably should have
Twitter,
mentioned
everything
what it's called. Yeah,
well.
Yeah, it's Hard4Games. You can search on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Our channel's on YouTube primarily.
All right. We have a quick question from Miss Click, who says,
she asked why Jesse's so ugly.
No, she asked about the locked wings.
Oh, that too. She asked 2 questions.
Well, did she really say that? That's horrible.
She really said that.
So rude.
So mean.
So rude.
So mean.
I think she removed it, but because I called her out on being rude.
So the Loftwing
yes, the
thing
Loftwings.
is a quick question while Daniel still searches for his, because this is like a one-word answer. She asked if you had a Loftwing from Skyward Sword, what color would your Loftwing be? I would go with blue, just because I like blue. If you can't tell from the chair and the wall, so
The wall that matches your chair.
yeah,
Would have never guessed.
yeah. So Ilya, color.
I know
What
it
color?
doesn't exist, but I want specifically antique rose.
Antique rose.
It is my absolute favorite color, dusty antique rose.
All right.
Oh,
And you, Tony?
Definitely a purple, like a deep
purple.
purple. Yeah, I got to
Enjoy
honor the late great Prince and greatest album of all time, Purple Rain. So
Wow.
definitely a deep, I'd say Wonderswan crystal colored purple. For those of you that know what a Wonderswan crystal is.
All right. And
I'm
Daniel?
gonna say teal because
Teal,
I like the teal colors, like blues and greens. Those are
Yeah.
my jam. So, when I used to play StarCraft back in the day, I always liked teal characters. So, it's
a good choice.
It's I just like the color, guys. Jeez.
All right. Were you able
Stop
to find?
harassing me, Jesse. So rude.
Were you able to find your question, Daniel?
Yeah, so two things here. First of all, it's been sitting in our mailbag a bit here, and it's not actually a question, but I don't know if we actually ever read it out on the podcast previously. But Chrissy G put just a shout out, love you guys all together. I miss King Burgerson, come back soon. So there was a podcast that I missed, and I wasn't there. Thanks, Chrissy, for missing me. The actual question, I can't remember. I think we might have at least discussed something similar to this. But the question goes by Spyrochick 101. We don't see the Gerudo and Twilight Princess, but we know they are allies and very close to the royal family in the time of Breath of the Wild. Did we answer this question, Jesse? Does it sound familiar? Well, I'm just going to keep going. When did this alliance occur? With Ganondorf gone, maybe the Gerudo were quote-unquote free, because they weren't ruled by force or fear of Ganon.
This is a
So,
deep lore question.
This is some lore-heavy stuff here. So in Ocarina of Time, the Gerudo are not really that. Politically speaking, the tension is there between the Gerudo and the Hylians. In Breath of the Wild, they're allies to the point where even Zelda's mother and Urbosa, who is the chief of the Gerudos, were close personal friends. So, I mean, we've got 10,000 years of time plus to work with between these two points of time here. So,
Okay,
when do you guys think this political tension was eased?
All right, so I'm going to say, because in Ocarina of Time, Link and Zelda look through the window and you can see Ganondorf kneeling before the king. We never see the king, but we see him, like, you know, kneeling before him or whatever.
Pledging
And
allegiance.
the Gerudo go to Hyrule to get their mates every so often. And the Gerudo hired the carpenters to fix the bridge when you're an adult. So I'm going to say the Gerudo always had a friendship. Not always, but because they were banished to the desert at one point. But I'm going to say they had a fairly good working relationship with the Hylians during Ocarina of Time. It's just their leader was the one that was corrupted, so it kind of influenced down to the normal civilian Gerudos. And once Ganondorf was banished, they were able to work out their differences. So that's what I'm going to say, is that the Gerudo weren't necessarily bad, they were just controlled by a bad leader. And even the twin Rova sisters were bad as well. So because Nabooru, who was like second in charge, was a good person, tried to help out. So the rest of them could have just been kind of like her. So that's what I'm going to say. But that is like a very like theory, deep lore stuff. So
yes,
it's very interesting.
This is the Star Wars Episode 1 of Zelda. We're getting into the politics here.
So Ilya, do you have anything to say about this? Are you familiar with the story?
Yeah. I was saying, and this is obviously, like you said, Daniel, like there's 10,000 years since, you know, the last game or anything. So it's like, well, there's plenty of time for this to have happened, so you could make up anything. But I was just thinking, and I hope I'm phrasing this right, and I might be spewing out incorrect information, so you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong. Zelda says that in Breath of the Wild, she says that she has this gift and her mother had this gift who should have taught her, and her grandmother taught it to her mother. My understanding, which makes me think that the royal bloodline runs through these women. That's not the king. The king was the one that married in.
Which makes sense because the goddess Hylia was reborn as Zelda initially. Okay.
So that means there's been, at least we know, 3 generations of females born to the royal family, and you know, so the bloodline not going through the males just yet, unless, so we know of at least 3, unless she says any further back. So I'm wondering if that had anything to do with an alliance coming up with the Gerudo, since the Gerudo are so strict on, you know, men can't come into our village, and you know that they're only used for reproductive purposes. So I'm wondering if having all these daughters and maybe the queen having more of a stand, I don't know, being more in charge, maybe that happened because she's the one with the bloodline, that somehow an alliance happened there because they may have become more trusting. I don't know if that makes any sense, but that was just my thought, since they're so strict about men and so biased towards them.
So
against them.
You're basically saying because the Gerudo
you got loud, son.
Are strong. Are like strong in like the belief of like, you know, them being like female power, whatever.
Yeah,
that the fact that there
strong
were
matriarchs or something like that.
Yeah, and then
you know, maybe there were a lot of kings that died young or something. You know, the opposite of what happened with Zelda's mom. You know, could have just as easily been our dad. There may have been some Hyrule that were ruled by only a queen, which always makes me think of Twilight Princess, because I'm like, where the king and queen at? If they ain't there, she the queen.
Yeah,
she's not 21.
Yeah, that's true. I felt like it was weird that she wasn't just the queen.
Yeah.
Maybe she wasn't officially.
Yeah, they hadn't like finished the coronation. Who knows? Who knows?
Could go on forever making up all this stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well,
that's
Tony, I'm not sure how entrenched with the lore of Zelda you are, but what are your thoughts?
You know, I was trying to think about how to word this, necessarily like bursting any bubbles. Because I think that a lot of times we create lore from something that the developers weren't even thinking about. You know what I mean? Oh, yeah. And I think that your two responses
He's using the real world logic.
Well, yeah. I mean, I think that your two responses are reasonable and probably make the most sense. You know, if there were to be like a lore behind it, like when was this alliance created? I think the reason why they're not in Twilight Princess, which I actually don't recall them not being in Twilight Princess, but I haven't played that game in so long.
They're not.
Yeah. So, and that's fine. But they're probably just not in it because they're not in it. Yeah. They probably just weren't crucial to the story. They probably weren't necessary. Not every race of being is in every Zelda game. You know, it's not necessarily. Well, it wasn't crucial, so it's not crucial. It gets cut.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So what we end up seeing is like, oh my god, like the alliance was broken after Ocarina of Time because of what Ganon did, you know, and then in Twilight Princess the alliance isn't there, and like, oh my god, when did it? But in reality, and this is, you know, I think it's a good question. It's not a slight on the person who asked it. I just think that I think we're looking for something that might not be there. Yeah. I don't know. So, you know, and it's, you know, I think that probably, Jesse, what you said is the most reasonable. They probably had a fine working relationship, and you know, they just weren't in Twilight Princess because they were doing something else.
Yeah.
You know.
So the thing that you said, using the real world logic, which it's always fun looking at like different fan theories and stuff. But there was an interview that I read with Miyamoto and Aonuma that kind of killed a certain type of Zelda theory for me, which is any geography-based theories on like, why is this location, like why is Lake Hylia in this game at like the bottom left of the map, but in this game it's like the center right or whatever. And there was an interview where they were asked about that, Aonuma, and he asked like if he was aware of like some of the fan theories and like what could have happened to make these places changes. Like another big one is Kakariko Village. Sometimes it's near Death Mountain, and then sometimes it's kind of like off on its own, like in A Link to the Past. It's like way like towards the bottom or to the center to the left, and Death Mountain's like towards the top. And he's basically asked like, you know, why do the locations change, and sometimes like Lake Hylia in Twilight Princess is like 10 times the size of the one in Ocarina of Time. And he basically said there is no lore, there's no theory, there's no in-game reason for this happening. The reason is we feel that if we were to put Lake Hylia in every single game, make it look exactly the same, have the same stuff there, the same landmarks, it would be boring.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
The reason that Kakariko Village changes locations, the reason Hyrule Castle's located in a different area, has nothing to do with lore or a theory. It's literally just because they thought it would be more fun if they made it that way, and that's the only reason. So like they don't think about any story reasons when they change everything. They're just thinking, well, we made it like this in this game, so in this game, what if we put an extra waterfall here just to make it a bit different? So,
I think that as fans we like to look in depth, but there's not always depth to it.
You see things like the Zelda Encyclopedia, the new book is out, actually tries to kind of make sense of the geography, ironically. It has a couple of pages kind of dedicated to it, and you know, it shows it, you know, rotating Ocarina of Time's map where it lines up a little better with the Link to the Past map and things like that. And it's interesting to look at it and be like, okay, yeah, so the landmarks line up more, even if north is suddenly, you know, northwest, but or northeast. But yeah, ultimately, like for me as well, like I've always told people when they're looking at Zelda theories and stuff like that, do not use geography to support your argument, because that is not what the developers would use to support their argument. That they would never look into that. But to humor the person who asked this question,
you can take us out.
Give an answer.
This is, you taking us. So
absolutely. To humor the question, though, I think still to give an answer, in Ocarina of Time, Ganondorf does sort of pledge allegiance, as it were. Twilight Princess, you know, you see in the backstory he's executed, whatnot. We don't really see the Gerudo. Kind of doesn't mean that they're not around. They might just be in a different part of the desert. A lot of people say that Gerudo, either Spirit Temple or Gerudo Fortress, were turned into the Arbiter's grounds, but there's no real confirmation or support one way or the other if that's actually the case, because they're just both locations that are in the desert. But we do see in Four Swords Adventure the Gerudo are there, and they are kind of peeved at that game's Ganondorf, who is a different Ganondorf, for kind of like going back behind their back and stuff. And they seem very nomadic, so you know, my thought is either oh sorry, there's supposedly like a civil war. My thought has always been that either the Gerudo kind of migrated, became a bit more nomadic, and then ended up resettling, or that they, in Twilight Princess's case, kind of became absorbed into Hylian society in a way, just kind of melded in with the rest of society for a time. But again, like there is like a 10,000-year gap between Breath of the Wild and every other game where politics could have changed so dramatically in that amount of time. And there was a long era of peace thanks to the Sheikah technology, as stated in Breath of the Wild's backstory. And with that peace is probably good politics. So those tensions probably would have been forgotten by the time Breath of the Wild rolled around. In fact, the only person to ever mention Ganondorf, origins as a Gerudo is Urbosa as well. So it's possible that the Hyrule Society on large doesn't even know that sort of this big threat originated from the Gerudo originally at the time of Breath of the Wild. So again, thank you for attending my lecture. Please like and subscribe.
Yes. All right, so that brings us to the very end of the podcast. Thank you, everyone. There are 33 people here, so thank you to the 33 people that stuck through this 2 hours. Tony, I apologize if I took too much of your time.
It's all good, man. I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So, Ilya, if people wanted to find more from you, where could they go? You have some new videos on your YouTube channel now.
I do. I post every other Wednesday, so this Wednesday I will have a new video with a new intro, thanks to Daniel. I'm so excited. Yeah, so you can just find me on YouTube as Ilya Rose. I call myself the Geek Apprentice, but it's really just look up Ilya Rose. Twitter is Rose_Ilya, and Instagram is Ilya Rose _the Geek Apprentice. Or just Geek Apprentice. But that's where you can find me, or you can watch a bunch of Jesse's videos, and you might hear my voice every now and again.
Yes. All right, Daniel.
Hello.
Who are you? What are you doing here?
Hey everybody, I'm Daniel. Okay, if you want to find me, I'm here on this podcast every single week except for like 2 weeks when I was like sick or dying or something. And you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at CaptBurgerson. That's CaptBurgerson. I also have a website called Burgerson Media, where I post all of the things that I work on ever.
Cheeseburger reviews.
No.
But I post everything that I work on, including videos that I edit for people like Jesse who want to pay me to do that, and you can do that as well. And royalty-free music if you want to use that in your videos. And if you do, just tell me because I'd love to watch your video because I'm that kind of guy. Yes, that's everything you need to know about me.
All right, and finally, our special guest. Once again, he's been on several videos in the past. I think we had one long interview a year or two ago, and then we had Daniel and I had him on a Zelda 64 discussion about a Nintendo article before it was known as Ocarina of Time, when it was still releasing in like 1997 or 96, one of the two. But it was eventually delayed and a bunch of changes happened. But it was really cool to go through like Nintendo's official website to see what they were saying about it and promoting it and screenshots, videos, and everything. So that was one of the funnest videos that I've ever done, to be honest.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. And then,
I'm glad I could help.
Yeah, Tony, he was like a very last minute. Daniel and I were looking at it and we were just like, well, who else do we know that we could bring in to this? And I was like, well, Tony is a genius because this is like his entire channel is like...
Come on.
Yeah. So like, yeah, basically we got Tony to come on. He was a lot more knowledgeable on it. He had some different ideas than I did, and Daniel had some different ideas than I did. So it was kind of good to debate and discuss on what some of the screenshots could have been. So you can go back, watch that. It was split into 2 videos. You should be able to easily find it if you just like type in Game Over Jesse and Hard4Games in the search bar. You should be able to find any of those videos. But finally, Tony, thank you for giving your time to come on the podcast.
Sure.
You're one of Daniel's favorite YouTube channels, and it's not just you. You have your team working as well. We've had you on. I don't want to like make it seem like the rest of your team isn't important. It's just when I respond to like the Twitter page or something, you're typically the one that replies.
I'm generally the social media manager, if you will, but the team is definitely absolutely crucial because they support the show and off screen and on screen, and they're just friends that I've had for years and years and years and years. But yeah, I really, I had a ton of fun on the Zelda episode that you had mentioned before. I had a ton of fun on the podcast and the mailbag and all that good stuff. So thank you for inviting me. Like I said, it's just kind of cool to chat about Zelda, nerd out for a little bit,
Yeah.
So it's all good stuff.
All right. Well, with that, thank you once again, everybody that's watching. There's a few more people that join at the very end, so I apologize, but the podcast has come to an end. Episode 40 of the Hylian Gamescast.
We're up to 40
Thank
already.
you all. Yeah. All right. So, bye, everybody.
Thanks. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you for watching.